Welcome to the Unraveling the Scriptures channel. The topic of ancient giants, especially those mentioned in sacred texts like the Bible, has intrigued scholars, theologians, and the curious for centuries. While this narrative may sound legendary to many, a persistent question continues to echo. What happened to the physical remains of these creatures described in the Scriptures? If these beings truly walked the earth, where are their bones? Are there reliable archaeological proofs supporting the existence of these giants, referred to in the Bible as NEPHILIM? In the book of Genesis, the NEPHILIM are described enigmatically as beings of great physical power and historical significance, heroes of old, men of renown. This description, full of symbolism and ambiguity, raises profound questions. Who were these men of renown? Were they merely warriors mythologized for their deeds, or were they, in fact, creatures of extraordinary proportions? The presence of these giants in popular imagination is not recent. They populate myths, legends, and traditions across various cultures worldwide, but it is in the biblical context that they acquire an even more mysterious aura, being directly linked to spiritual downfall and divine judgment. Throughout history, archaeologists and independent researchers have claimed to find traces, artifacts, and even remains that could be associated with these colossal beings. In this video, we will delve into the most intriguing claims and the most controversial discoveries regarding the supposed existence of giants in antiquity. We will examine gigantic skeletons, disproportionate tools, ancient records, and photographs that have circulated globally, some genuine, others possibly fabricated, all contributing to keeping the mystery alive. What can these findings tell us? And why do so many of these pieces of evidence seem to disappear so quickly from academic and scientific debate? Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. These topics involve millennia-old mysteries, and your support helps us continue to explore these fascinating questions in depth. The book of Genesis makes two direct mentions of the NEPHILIM, one before and one after Noah's flood, a detail often overlooked but which raises an important theological and historical question. If, as Genesis 7:23 states, the flood wiped out all life on earth, including the NEPHILIM, how could they be mentioned again afterward? The word NEPHILIM has a complex etymology. In some translations of the Hebrew Bible, it is rendered directly as giants, while in others, it is left untranslated, suggesting the term carries a deeper or even unknown meaning. Some scholars link the root of the word to the Hebrew verb nafal, meaning to fall, or those who fell. This fuels theories that associate the NEPHILIM with a lineage of fallen celestial beings, or with a hybrid race resulting from the union of the sons of God and the daughters of men, as described in Genesis 6:4. Interestingly, after the flood, the Bible continues to mention enormous peoples inhabiting the land of Canaan. Among them are the Anakim, the Rephaim, also known as the Eni or Emim, and the Amorites, all described as peoples of great stature and strength. This recurrence suggests that the presence of the NEPHILIM, or at least their lineage, persisted even after the cataclysm narrated in Genesis. The Book of Numbers provides one of the most striking accounts in this regard. In it, Moses sends spies to the land of Canaan to survey the territory. The report they bring back is alarming. "We cannot attack those people. They are stronger than we are. All the men we saw there were of great stature. We saw the NEPHILIM, descendants of Anak. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." Numbers 13:31-33. The metaphor used by the spies, comparing themselves to grasshoppers in the presence of these colossal figures, reveals the fear and awe inspired by what they witnessed. Were they exaggerating out of fear, or were they reporting something that truly challenges our current understanding of human history? Years later, under the leadership of Joshua during the conquest of Canaan, other biblical texts again mention these peoples. Passages like Joshua 14:12-15 and 15:13-14 recount battles with the descendants of Anak, described as mountain dwellers, imposing men, and feared warriors. Throughout the upcoming sections of this video, I will present a selection of archaeological findings that, according to some researchers, may be linked to this mysterious lineage of giants. Historical photographs, excavation reports, official documents, and field testimonies will help us reconstruct this enigma, little discussed in traditional academic circles. After all, why are there so few mentions of these discoveries in textbooks and universities? Is the existence of the Nephilim being hidden, neglected, or simply discredited? It is time to follow the clues, one by one, based on the data available. Giants, figures that straddle the line between myth and history, are traditionally described as human in form, but with extraordinary proportions. In some representations, however, these creatures not only displayed enormous sizes, ranging from 10 to 16 feet tall, but could also bear features considered monstrous, which set them even further apart from the common human image. What made them unmistakable was not only their colossal stature, but also their impressive physical strength and the imposing aura their accounts evoked throughout the centuries. The very word giant carries historical weight. First recorded in 1297, it derives from the Greek gigas, directly linked to Hellenic mythology. In ancient Greece, giants were described as children of the earth, beings of immense power who challenged the gods of Olympus in epic battles. This etymological root suggests that, from ancient times, humanity has sought to name and understand these colossal figures, placing them alternately in the realm of myth or as remnants of a forgotten past. Before we dive into the supposed physical remains that have been found, it is crucial to highlight one point. Many of these discoveries, like other artifacts of biblical or mystical value, appear to have been deliberately silenced. Reports of unusually sized skeletons appear in older periodicals, only to disappear in subsequent editions. Numerous accounts suggest that giant skeletons were found, but were quickly removed from circulation without explanation. Some claim that universities, museums, and scientific institutions suppressed or archived these materials, preventing them from reaching the public eye. Despite this apparent concealment, reports continue to emerge. Fossil evidence and archaeological records associated with giants appear on different continents, often documented by travelers, missionaries, and scholars. A recurring pattern emerges. Images or accounts of skeletons found in regions like Palestine or Africa rarely reach the wider public, but remain as fragments of a puzzle suggesting the possible existence of extraordinarily tall beings. Among the most cited cases is the so-called Giant of Castellnau, one of the discoveries that made the greatest impact in 19th century Europe. Estimated at about 11 feet 6 inches, approximately 3.5 meters tall, this skeleton drew the attention of French anthropologist Georges Vacher de Lapouge. He found it during the winter of 1890 in a Bronze Age cemetery located in Castellnau, southern France. Upon encountering the skeletal fragments, Lapouge was reportedly deeply impressed. The height calculated from the measurements far exceeded the known human average, immediately recalling biblical narratives. Goliath, the Philistine warrior defeated by David, was the figure evoked by the anthropologist. To Lapouge, the skeleton seemed to materialize a tradition that had, until then, been interpreted only as myth or religious metaphor. The Castellnau remains were not ignored. They were sent to the University of Montpellier, where analyses were conducted by renowned specialists such as Professors Sabater and Delage, associated with zoology and paleontology. 2 years later, in 1892, Dr. Paul-Louis-André Kiener, professor of pathological anatomy at the Montpellier School of Medicine, conducted further study. His conclusions were startling. The fragments belonged to a human race of extraordinary stature, far beyond known standards. For some interpreters of the time, Kiener's statement pointed directly to a possible connection with the ancient Nephilim, cited in biblical texts as descendants of celestial beings. The press in the following decade reinforced the narrative. In 1894, French newspapers reported the discovery of giant bones in another prehistoric cemetery, also in the Montpellier region. This time, the focus was on the skulls found. The measurements were astonishing. Circumferences of 71, 78, and even 81 centimeters, numbers far exceeding those recorded in individuals of normal height. Alongside these, other bones of equally impressive proportions suggested they belonged to beings approximately 9.8 to 13.1 feet tall. These findings, described as belonging to an ancient race of giants, were sent for analysis to the Paris Academy. The impact was immediate. Simply publishing these measurements sparked comparisons with biblical descriptions. Once again, the memory of Goliath and the giant warriors returned to the popular imagination, reinforcing the idea that the sacred accounts might contain a kernel of historical truth. Another case that attracts significant interest is that of the Siteka, also called Sidoka, mentioned in the oral traditions of Native American tribes. These indigenous accounts describe a race of giants feared for their cannibalistic practices, extremely fair skin, and reddish hair, a rare trait among the local peoples. For the communities, the Siteka were not merely legendary figures, but real enemies, remembered in stories passed down through generations. The most famous episode involving these giants dates back to 1911, when guano miners were exploring Lovelock Cave in the state of Nevada, United States. During the excavation, human remains of unusual proportions were found, along with various artifacts. The account of James H. Hart, one of the first explorers to enter the cave, drew attention for its detailed description. He reported discovering a large mummified body measuring approximately 1.98 meters tall. Most striking, however, was the red hair still preserved on the mummy's scalp, seemingly confirming the oral traditions of the local tribes. The body was buried about 1.20 meters deep in the north-central part of the cave. However, the story of Lovelock Cave is also one of irreparable loss. During the first year of excavation, many human remains and artifacts were destroyed or simply disappeared. One of the most reported incidents involved the best-preserved adult mummy, which was boiled and discarded by members of a local fraternal society. Their goal was to obtain only the skeleton for initiation rituals, resulting in the destruction of one of the excavation's most valuable finds. The measurements were astonishing. Circumferences of 71, 78, and even 81 centimeters, numbers far exceeding those recorded in individuals of normal height. Alongside these, other bones of equally impressive proportions suggested they belonged to beings approximately 9.8 to 13.1 feet tall. However, this information faces resistance in academic circles. Researcher Adrienne Mayer, in her book Fossil Legends of the First Americans, argues that many of these accounts may have been misinterpretations of fossils of large prehistoric animals. Still, the fact that different indigenous sources mention the same traits, fair skin and red hair, keeps the question about the origins of these stories alive. The controversy is not limited to the Americas. Around the world, reports circulate of giant skeletons, often linked to alleged concealment conspiracies. For example, on the internet, the story gained notoriety of a giant human skeleton supposedly found in Saudi Arabia by an oil company. The material was allegedly immediately confiscated and silenced by the Saudi government. While the authenticity of this story is highly contested, it gained traction because it resonates with already familiar religious traditions. Sacred texts, such as the Torah and the Quran, also mention the existence of giants. One example is Og, king of Bashan, described as a man of extraordinary proportions. Some traditions estimate his height at about 4.70 meters, making him one of the most remarkable figures in Middle Eastern giant lore. These mentions reinforce the idea that different cultures, across various eras and regions, preserved memories or beliefs related to humans of colossal stature. One of the most intriguing accounts regarding potential giants in ancient Egypt involves the so-called colossal sarcophagi of Saqqara. Unlike typical coffins found in tombs, these structures challenge the imagination with their scale and weight. Each sarcophagus measures approximately 13 feet in length by 6 feet 6 inches in width, carved entirely from massive stone blocks. The main structure alone weighs about 77 short tons, while the equally monumental lid adds another 33 short tons. Transporting and fitting such blocks would have required highly advanced engineering, especially considering they were constructed thousands of years ago. According to some reports, bones of gigantic proportions were found inside certain sarcophagi. However, these findings never clearly reached the scientific community. Many were silenced, sold on black markets for antiquities, or simply disappeared without official records. This silence reinforces suspicions of intentional suppression of information related to possible evidence of giants in antiquity. Another widely discussed story, which gained international attention, is that of the so-called giant finger of Egypt. Considered by some independent researchers as material evidence of the existence of the ancient NEPHILIM, this artifact is said to be a mummified fragment belonging to a human of enormous stature. The episode dates back to 1988, when Swiss photographer Gregor Spurri traveled to Egypt in search of material for a personal project. During his stay, he gained access to an Egyptian family with a history of tomb raiding, located on a farm about 100 kilometers from Cairo. For a payment of $300, Spurri was allowed to observe part of the treasures accumulated over the years. It was in this context that he came across something unexpected: a mummified finger measuring 38 centimeters in length. The relic was kept in an elongated box, wrapped in old fabric and carrying the characteristic smell of mold. The fragment, dark brown in color, showed cracks and signs of deterioration over time, but still retained a clearly anatomical shape. For Spurri, the sight was striking. In a later interview with the German newspaper Bild, the photographer reported that his heart raced upon seeing the artifact, describing the experience as unique in his life. The Egyptian family allowed him to photograph the piece, and to show its scale, a handwritten note was placed alongside it. Additionally, the owners showed Spurri a supposed certificate of authenticity and even an X-ray of the finger, dated to the 1960s, documents that, according to them, confirmed the artifact's legitimacy. If it were human, a 38-centimeter finger would correspond to an individual approximately 3.60 meters tall, a height considered biologically impossible by known anthropological standards. This discrepancy fueled the hypothesis that the artifact could be related to the Nephilim, mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as beings of extraordinary stature who inhabited the region of Canaan before the flood. Despite the impact of the discovery, Spurri never had further contact with the family that owned the artifact. In 2009, more than 20 years later, he returned to Egypt in search of new clues about the giant finger, but was unable to locate the family or the object. During his investigation, he only found an unfinished giant sarcophagus at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza, without establishing any direct connection between that find and the mysterious mummified finger. The supposed giant finger remains shrouded in mystery to this day. For some, it would be concrete evidence that giants really existed in ancient Egypt. For others, it is merely a fraudulent or misinterpreted artifact. The fact is that the enigma was never resolved and continues to be one of the most cited cases when discussing alleged physical proof of the existence of giants in antiquity. We have now reached the end of this presentation, where we explored archaeological reports and discoveries that, according to various records, point to the existence of beings of colossal proportions. Skeletons, fragments, and even artifacts associated with these giants have appeared throughout history, but often they were silenced, hidden, or simply forgotten over time. If you wish to delve even deeper into this topic, especially the figures described in the sacred scriptures, we invite you to explore our playlist dedicated to biblical giants, where we gather other episodes, accounts, and analyses. Thank you for following this investigation with us. May knowledge continue to inspire new searches and reflections. See you soon.